Just want to show you a quick little visual of how I'm draining all this stuff. So I take this big soup spoon here and I have this mesh strainer over a big large stock pot. This probably isn't going to be big enough for all that, so I might have to do this in 2 different batches. But once I put all the bits in here, I let it drip until it mostly not dripped, or it mostly doesn't drip anymore. And then too, I kind of take my spoon and I kind of push down on it, make sure I get the most amount of deliciousness out of there. So that's what I do with that. Once you strain everything out, you could put it in the fridge or just leave it sit on the counter for a while. What you want to do is scoop off as much of the fat as you can. You don't have to get all of it, but I would get 99% of it if you can. The fat is kind of what makes it go rancid. And you know, for me, I'm not gonna leave it on the counter or on the shelf too long. When I can't, I'm gonna pressure can this. That's one of the ways that that I preserve the broth. So I'm gonna walk you through that. But while I'm doing this, I guess I will talk about other ways you can preserve this. In the past, I have put it in the freezer. I have frozen it in like 1 cup little parts, like in a Tupperware container, or even just even in the mason jars. I put them in the freezer. You just want to make sure you leave at least a good inch headspace, maybe a little more, because you know this will expand when it freezes. And if you're going to freeze it, you don't have to worry so much about this part. But like I said, if you are going to be canning it, like I'm going to show you here, then you definitely need to do this step. Another thing too is ice cube trays. You can put these in ice cube trays. Once they freeze, take them out, store them in a plastic Ziploc bag or another container, and you can just add a couple tablespoons of flavor to, say, you know, gravies. I used to use it when I made rice. I drop a couple of those in my measuring cup before I measured out the water, and that gave it a nice little flavor. You know, any soups, anything you're gonna cook, it's a nice little additive. So that's one idea. Okay, so I've skimmed off the good chunk of the fat. And now for pressure canning, what I'm going to do is put this on the stove. It needs to come to a boil. And then I will be right back to show you the canner. Okay, so what I have here is a Presto 23-quart pressure canner and cooker. I only use this for canning. I don't cook with it at all, other than to can. For me personally, I just like to leave that stuff separate, but you can also use this as a pressure cooker, but I use it as a canner. It came with this plate here, which is very important. Make sure you have this at the very bottom of the canner. That protects the jars. You do not, just like in the water bath canner, if you remember from my choke cherry syrup video, you don't want any of your jars directly on the bottom of a pot that you're canning with. You don't want the jars to have direct contact with the heat element at all. So that's very important. Otherwise you'll have cracked jars. It could cause a lot of problems. So be mindful of that. There's all kinds of canners out there. The reason I bought this one is because it is approved for glass top stoves, which is what I have. So always make sure that if you have a glass top, that you do your research and make sure that the canner that you purchase is going to be compatible with that. What I really like about this one is that it's wide, but it has kind of a little indented part here, and this is the part that that touches the element, the heat element. So It's kind of nice that, you know, at first I was like, oh geez, I don't think my burner's gonna be big enough for this whole thing, but this little piece here is what takes the heat, so that's perfect there. Another thing you want to check for every time you use your canner is your lid. Your lid is what's going to hold in the pressure. It's what's going to keep things safe. So there are a few elements on here that you need to really pay attention to. The first being the rubber gasket that's along the inside of it. This particular one, it goes on the inside. You want to make sure there's no cracks. It's not dried out or any of that. You know, every once in a while I go through with some like olive oil or vegetable oil, and I'll give it a good once over just to make sure that the rubber is going to stay flexible and not dry out and stuff. So that's very important. The other thing you always want to double check on your lid are your little safety features. So this is a little emergency steam valve. Pops up when the pressure gets really high, and it releases the steam. This also releases steam. So you want to make sure that this is rubber also. You want to make sure that this isn't dried out or anything funky is going on with that. And it's properly inserted. This part here is where you're going to put the weight. So just make sure that it's, you know, clear of any debris or anything like that. My particular model came with a pressure gauge and a weight. So you can use either the weight or the gauge. It doesn't really matter. But be consistent and stick with one or the other. I like the visual of the gauge. With these, it's very important you get these tested once a year. Make sure that they're at the proper pressure and that it's working properly. You can get that done at your county extension office, I believe. I'm going to have to probably do that here in the near future. It's been about a year since I've been using this particular canner, so I want to make sure that this is okay. Now, with the water bath canner, elevation plays a huge part in this. So where we're at here, we use 15 pounds of pressure, which is actually what this is. This is a 15-pound weight. A lot of canners will come with, you know, 2 or 3 different weights that you can put on here. Just always double check your elevation. That's very important. And 2, I'll talk a little bit about why I'm pressure canning this and not water bath canning. So water bath canning is for high acid foods, such as tomatoes, jellies, fruits, things of that nature. And those things, you know, the acid helps preserve them and keep them from spoiling. This broth doesn't really have much to protect it in that respect. So things like meat, potatoes, vegetables, carrots, peas, corn, things like that need to be pressure canned. The broth, soup, you can make soup and things like that. I suggest that if you really serious about getting started with canning, I suggest you buy that Ball Blue book that I mentioned in my previous video, or another canning book like it. And also, again, I'll leave a link below, and if I remember, I'll leave a link in the description box. The website for home preservation, I'll leave that in the description box below as well. As well as, again, that Canning 101 video from Guildbrook Farm that if you're a visual learner and you like to see things played out, I recommend you watch that video because it's long, but it is in depth, and she does a really awesome job of explaining everything. So this is the basics of what I'm going to have going on here today. Also, as with the water bath canner, I've washed my jars. They're clean. They're drying in the rack back there. And then what I'm going to do is see how many will fit in here. I think it's 7 or 8 quarts that I'm going to put in here. But that will determine, you know, how much I can tonight, because I don't think I'll have another batch going. But anyway, so As with the water bath canning, you put your jars in here, you fill it with water, and you kind of let it heat up. You don't bring it to a boil necessarily right away. Just heat it up so that your jars are hot, because your broth will be hot, and that will kind of keep the process flowing smoothly, and everything will come to temperature at the right time. So I'm going to get going. I'm going to fill this up, and I'll be back with you. Okay, as you can see, I put 7 jars in there. 6 regular mouth and 1 wide mouth jar. That's plenty there. And then I have it filled up about halfway. Each canner is different, so make sure you check the instructions on your canner as to how high you need the water level to properly and safely can your items. So now it's just turn the burner on, wait for everything to heat up. I'm waiting on the broth to boil and things like that. And then we'll come back to the next step. And then also too, I put the pressure gauge on the top in its proper place. Just be very careful when you're doing that. You don't want to bump it or bend it or do anything too crazy with it. So just be very careful when you are putting that on there. Our stock has come to a boil. So we're ready to start canning. And our jars are warm. So what you'll need are lids, rings for the type of jar, wide mouth, regular mouth. One of these jar grabbers, highly recommend these. They make everything way easier and safer. A funnel, a measuring tool to see measure proper headspace, and a ladle or something to scoop the broth into the jars. So I will turn the camera around and we'll get going on that. You want to lift the jars very carefully out of the hot water, and you place your funnel there, and then very carefully you want to scoop this boiling broth in there, and you want to leave a 1-inch headspace. So as I said in my other video, the headspace is space between whatever you're canning and the top of the jar. So that is very important. Put it in there. I used to have a big measuring cup that I would use for this, but the handle broke on it, so I'm stuck with this piddly little ladle. So slowly but surely we'll get this all in here. So keep scooping. Scoop, scoop, scoop. Oops, that's probably plenty full. I'll check the headspace on that. See, 1 inch, the biggest one. Oh yeah, that's. Oop, need to take a little bit out of there. And headspace is important for a couple of reasons. The biggest reason is just so that it doesn't overflow and compromise your seal. Not only compromise your seal, but it's a big mess, and you don't want a big mess on your hands. Trust me. All right. Take a little bit more of that out. And same as with the choke cherry syrup, you want to take a little bit of vinegar and paper towel or a rag and just wipe the rim. Make sure it's clean. And then we'll put your lids on. There we go. Just finger tight, you don't have to get crazy with it. And back in the canner it goes. And you will repeat this for all of the jars that you have to fill in. So let's stay tuned. As you can see, I have all 7 jars in there. I've adjusted the water level for this canner, and now I'm gonna close the lid and turn up the heat and get this thing up to pressure. This particular lid locks into place, so I have it locked into place. You want to make sure it's good and tight. It's not going to move or anything. And then you turn up your heat. Mine, it doesn't go all the way to high. It doesn't need to. Mine, sweet spot's between 8 and 9 in there. Kind of know your own stove and things like that. So, yeah, so what you want to do is wait for it to start steaming. And it'll start coming out of this vent in the back. And then you're going to let it, what they call vent, for 10 minutes. And I'll bring you back and show you what that looks like. Or, it's this one here. Sorry. We'll be back. Whoa. So, hopefully you can see that. It's steaming really well. I'm not going to put my hand close to it because it's hot. So that's what you want. That's steady stream. And then you're going to vent it for 10 minutes. So I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes and we'll be back. Timer is done. Once that is done, you want to put your weight on the vent there very carefully. And now you just wait for the pressure to rise up to whatever PSI your instructions for your elevation said. We're above 1,000 feet, so we need 15 pounds of pressure, so I'm going to patiently wait for it to get to 15. Alright, now you can see the weight is rocking. That means that you've reached the pressure. You can also see on the gauge that we've reached 15 pounds of pressure, which is what I need for my elevation here. Now I'm going to set the timer for 30 minutes, and that is how much to process quart jars, which is what I have in here. So I'm going to set the timer, and then we'll be back when it's ready for the next part. And also, too, don't just walk away from this. Keep a very close eye on that gauge, because you do not want it to get much higher than 15 pounds. A little bit above is okay. What I usually have to do is I just have to keep dialing back the heat a little bit, till it kind of reaches that sweet spot. And you kind of get to know your oven and things like that. So, but yeah, that's very important. Don't walk away. Don't leave the house. Don't go to the basement. Just stay where you can hear and monitor what's going on. So, we'll be back. Alright. Timer is done. So turn off the timer. Hopefully you can hear me. Turn off the heat. And that's it. Don't touch the weight. Don't try and open the cover. Just don't. There's 15 pounds of pressure coming up and out of the thing, and it's not a good idea to try and break the pressure anytime soon. You could crack jars, you could really burn yourself, you could have an explosion, I don't know. So you're going to let that come down to 0 naturally. So turn off the burner and just let it come down to 0. Okay, now the gauge is to 0. You can remove the weight. There'll be a little steam. Don't be scared. And then you're going to want to let it sit for another 10 minutes at least, until there's no more steam venting out of there. So we'll be back. Alright, after about 10 minutes, when it's done venting, you can carefully open the lid. Make sure you lift it up away from your face, because there will be some steam that will escape. And then wait a few more minutes, remove the jars. Whoop. Alright, we're getting seals. Remove the jars and let them cool for about 24 hours before you clean them up and label them for storage. Alright, this is next morning, so I've been sitting out about about 9 hours or so. I was up late. So yeah, as you can see, they're doing really well. Seem to have all sealed, so that's good. Probably tonight I'll do the cleaning up and labeling them and putting them on the shelves downstairs. And the process will start all over again because I still have a big pan of it to do. So, but it feels good to know that I'm going to have all this stuff put away for winter, for rainy days, for anytime I want to make a quick meal for Sean and I, and know that it's not going to be full of preservatives and all that nonsense. So, hope you enjoyed this video. If you found this helpful or useful, please share, and I hope you all have a good day.